Good morning and happy Saturday, everyone. How's everyone doing out there?
Woohoo!
Great.
Fabulous.
All right. Well, we've got cameras up in different parts of the United States here, but here in Michigan, I was surprised to see what a foggy morning we've got out there this morning. It's really been amazing September, that's for sure. Well, we're going to get right into it. We've got a couple of things knowingly on the docket. I'm going to do a continuation of this little baby here that we covered in last week's episode. If those of you that caught that episode, that's the Stello CGM, otherwise known as a continuous glucose meter. What's unique about it? You don't need a prescription, and that is a absolute game changer. So we're going to continue on that topic and actually look at a couple of things. I'm going to go through 8 reasons CGM is really insightful. And the second thing I'm going to do is a bit of a screen share and take a look at one particular individual's glucose reading so that those that are able to view your screens or view this on a recording, you can kind of take a look at that and gain some of the insights that we're going to go through on that. And then we've got Carol that's going to be talking about some things related to stomach acid and topics around there. And as a matter of fact, Carol, if you're good to go, we're going to turn it over to you and have you start us off this morning. Good morning, Carol.
Good morning. Good morning. Well, I'm trying to find a shady spot here. So I think I'll just plant myself on the edge of the road. Yeah. Well, I'm excited to hear what you have to say, Eric, about the CGM, because I think that can be a wonderful tool for better health for all of us. And it's interesting, the years that I've been involved with HealthPointe, how it just seems to always flow back into that balanced eating program, the HealthPointe eating plan, and the HealthPointe healthy living program. And so it's just interesting how I think every time you, Eric, or any of us come up with things, it just seems to all go back to how perfect HealthPointe is. So I'd like to really start with that. But many of you know I have a favorite, Dr. Vivian, and I like to follow her stuff because she's not promoting anything in particular as far as the supplementation line or anything, but she talks in general about different topics. They kind of all lead back to the path of bone health because that's her specialty, which, to be honest with you, is what holds us together. The bones and the muscles is what holds us together. And so I think it's definitely something that we always want to stay at the forefront of our mind. But this particular article I thought was interesting, and I'm going to send this on to somebody that I think it might really, really help, that I just was communicating with during the week. So anyway, but it says why your bones need stomach acid and how to ensure you're producing enough. Now, when we think of stomach acid, we think of all the antacids, the PPIs, protein inhibitors, proton inhibitors, and all the things because of acid reflux and all the things people deal with. And so many times we want to think of it as keeping that acid as low as we can. But as she says in here, and I'm going to read a little bit of this because I don't want to get it messed up and I want to stay on target here. But she says stomach acid is a critical component of your digestive process. And isn't that what we've been talking so much about with our Begin product and our all of our digestive enzymes and what have you? It's your digestive system. If it can't function properly, you're not going to be able to get the nutrients from your supplements or your food into your body and, like she says, into your bones. And that was what keeps you strong. And she says that in this article, we're going to examine the connection between proton pump inhibitors, PPIs, and some of you will be familiar with that, that are prescribed to reduce stomach acid and osteoporosis. And then you'll learn drug-free ways to cultivate healthy levels of stomach acid. So she goes on to say the acid in your stomach plays an indispensable role in food digestion. And that's really what we want, because if we're eating and we can't digest, then we're not, this is just kind of worthless. And she says the PPIs prescribed to reduce stomach acid and osteoporosis. She says the acid in your stomach plays an indispensable role in food digestion. And she said, your stomach must maintain a very narrow range of acidity to optimize the breakdown of compounds and absorptions of micronutrients. And she talks about pepsin. Pepsin is an enzyme in your body that your body uses to digest protein. If your stomach acid levels are too low, then your pepsin level will be too. And as a result, your stomach won't be able to break down proteins into their component amino acids for absorption. And isn't that what we talk about almost every week is amino acids? It seems like we always get back to that topic of the importance of the amino acids and building your muscles, keeping your protein levels up and what have you. She says there's many micronutrients that your body can't pull from your diet. And she said insufficient protein can lead to sarcopenia, and that's the loss of muscle mass. And as muscle mass decreases, bone mass follows. Well, because your muscle mass is what holds your bones together and holds your body together. So there are many micronutrients that your body can't pull from your diet without using stomach acid in the process. And that includes many foundational bone building minerals like calcium. And, you hear of these people breaking their bones, falling and breaking their bones. And that's just the beginning of a downward spiral, especially as you get into the aged population. It says your bones also need stomach acid to effectively absorb iron, vitamin B12, folate, and zinc. And so she does a little synopsis. Stomach acid is essential for breaking down and absorbing protein. There are many micronutrients that your body can't pull from food without using stomach acids in the process, including calcium. So then she goes on to say a deficiency of hydrochloric acid in the stomach is called hypochlorhydria. Now, I'm not going to get real technical on that, but she says hydrochloric acid eliminates bacteria and viruses in your stomach, protecting you from infections. And here are some of the things that it causes when you don't have the proper balance: bloating, heartburn, diarrhea, burping, upset stomach, nausea taking supplements. In other words, you get sick when you're taking your supplements. Gas, indigestion, fatigue, GI infections, hair loss, brittle fingernails, neurological symptoms such as numbness, tingling, and vision changes. So you can see that it affects a lot of areas by just not having that proper balance. And she says low stomach acids also have been associated with chronic conditions, including lupus, allergies, asthma, psoriasis, eczema, gastritis, thyroid issues, acne, chronic autoimmune diseases or disorders, pernicious anemia, and osteoporosis. Hypochlorhydria has a number of potential causes. So here's some of the things that are causing it. Age. Stomach acid production slows with age, as everything does. Your digestive enzymes slow with age. Everything slows with age, and that's why people say, "Oh man, it seems like I gotta be taking all these vitamins, all these supplements." I said, "Yeah, well, at 21, you produced this. You don't produce it so much anymore. Every 10 years, your body takes on a new ability to absorb, and it happens over that 10-year period. And so if every 10 years you find you're taking more supplements, well, hallelujah for having those supplements to be able to take to fill in the voids that because you're aging does not produce anymore." Another one is H. pylori. That's an infection with bacteria. H. pylori causes stomach ulcers, and over time, it can result in low stomach acid. Surgeries, certain surgeries like gastric bypass surgery. How many people are getting those gastric bypasses? Reduce stomach acid production. Chronic stress. Well, good grief. Is there not a person on this earth today that doesn't have stress, including young people? And then medications. And this is what happens. You get the acid reflux and then you take medications. Antacids, or medications prescribed to treat ulcers and acid reflux. And these can all lead to this hypochlorhydria situation. So it says that a deficiency of hydrochloric acid in the stomach is called hypochlorhydria. It causes several digestive symptoms and has been associated with a variety of chronic health conditions, including osteoporosis. Common causes, as she said, include age, stress, certain bacterial infections, antacids, or acid reflux medications. So you can see that it has a lot of outlying reaches, and it can create a lot of these illnesses that we never had that much before, and now you're hearing it over and over again. So then she goes on to talk about proton pump inhibitors. Given the low level of stomach acid, inhibit your ability to absorb the nutrients you need to keep your bones healthy, as she stated before. It naturally follows that reduced stomach acid, such as proton pump inhibitors, or many people know them as PPIs, could lead to bone loss. And it also leads to a lot of these other conditions because you're cutting down on your natural stomach acids. So she goes on, but the bottom line, she says, is how to increase stomach acid naturally. The first thing you want to do is chew thoroughly. Well, we're all in this rush society, and I find myself a lot of times chewing maybe inadequately, eating too fast. And I have to slow myself down and say, chew more, and swallow slower. So you just have to slow it down when you're eating. It's not eat and run, because that's not healthy for you and you're not getting your nutrients. And she says the process of chewing signals body to produce digestive enzymes and fluids such as stomach acid. So, it's the old Mother Nature. Our bodies are so beautifully put together and so uniquely balanced. And I would say that just like in the HealthPointe program, if you keep balance is so important. And some of the general things that you can use is ginger. I think it was Regina George years ago told me about just taking ginger and putting it into tea, grate ginger and put it into a hot cup of water and drink it. It's very satisfying. In fact, Hank loves ginger tea, ginger and lemon tea. And he drinks that, I think, almost every day. Lemon, okay, similar to ginger, lemon can help stimulate your stomach acid production and maintain a healthy stomach acidity. Or you can just take tea and add lemon juice, or you can make homemade bone healthy lemonade. And I'm not sure exactly how to do that. And then the last one, and I think this is something that we all have to address, and that's avoid stress. Stressful situations put your body on high alert, diverting energy away from your digestive tract. Find a calm environment for your meals and set aside stressors. That means cell phones, get them out of there. If you have to put on very low, soft music, or just sometimes quiet. Hank and I never have television on during the day. We don't have any noise on. We like quiet. And so as much as that's possible for you, and I understand many of you are out in the working field, but the more you can keep your environment quiet, the more that you have the ability to control the amount of stress that does come in, and it will. And then I would like to say that we have two wonderful products that have just recently come out, I say within the last year to 2 years, that we love. And one of them is the ashwagandha. And that is part of our Nutrilite certified organic line. And ashwagandha, we take one in the morning, one in the evening. That's how they suggest them. And we take them with our supplements. And that keeps your stress level very level. And also the anti-stress probiotic. Now, we personally like the Balance Within in the morning, but many times we'll take the anti-stress probiotic at night. And let me tell you, if you have problems sleeping, that is one of the best things that you can do to just give yourself a really good restful sleep where you don't have 1,000 things going through your mind. So she ends with saying, a small change that prioritizes stomach acid production can make a big difference. And if you have that problem, try some of those things. And then also, she said, if you're still having the problem, work with a holistic doctor on this, because your regular medical doctor is going to put you on something that will cut the acid, because he said the acid's the problem. Well, when you cut the acid, it perpetrates more problems. And that's what we find so much in typical modern medicine, is that it creates other problems. You zap a med on it, and then it creates another problem. It throws the body out of balance. And when the body's out of balance, it cannot operate as God meant it to operate and as he made us. So with that, Eric, I'm going to turn that back over to you. And that's my take on stomach acids.
Wow, so much good stuff here. And I definitely have some questions, some commentary. But before I just dive into that, if there's anyone else that's on the call that has any questions, comments, I want to leave it open for questions and comments. If you do have anything, you can unmute and chime in. And so as people are considering that, let me jump in here. And Carol, this is really, really powerful stuff. So a couple of things you mentioned, and in fact, just checking here, I think somebody actually somebody that's on the Zoom here. And I think some of us that are coaches have experienced this before. You mentioned about Dr. Vivian mentioning about if this GI tract is unhealthy or somebody's taking these PPIs, it could be resulting in kind of a nausea with taking supplementation. Mm-hmm. Okay. And those of us that are, well, anybody on HealthPointe maybe has experienced that out of the gate. And certainly if you're a coach and you've worked with a number of people, you may have heard it. And what it makes, now there's a couple of things that historically we have done with that. One is just kind of ease into it. If you go from, it's kind of like going from 0 to 60, sometimes it's better to go kind of gradual. So particularly, we have such a nutrient dense multivitamin, multimineral in the XX product. Sometimes it's advised, hey, if you have any of that kind of effect, when you start taking that product on your 6-week cycle, maybe do a half a dose and kind of ease for a week or so and ease into it. But it makes me think, Carol, with the Begin product, again, you started with the commentary about this Begin GI product. Guys, we have, and if you're not familiar with this, just check with your coach that can advise you on this. But it's a green powder. You put a scoop of it into your liquid, and it's a GI health product. It's amazing. And
they call it a primer.
Yes.
I think that's a good name for it.
I think so too. And so one of the things, having started taking that product myself and being familiar with the flavor, when you mentioned on some of the things that she was commenting on, and Vivian, this is in terms of being a helpful solutions, you mentioned ginger. Well, I pulled it up real quick while you were talking and looked at the ingredient list, and you know how at the top, whatever starts in the ingredient list, that is your highest percentage. Guess what number 1 is on that? Ginger. Okay, in the other ingredients. Okay, and those of us that have taken that product, there is this pleasant little hint of ginger in the backdrop. Now, there's a lot of other flavors that are in there because it's quite a mixture of incredibly healthy doses of various products in there. But ginger is one of them in there. But I wonder, if someone was having that type of nausea with trying to take some of the other supplementation, if maybe the Begin product and getting their GI tract healthier might not help with that situation. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think, and I don't have my ingredient sheet in front of me, but I believe it talks about certain alkaline spices too in there. And, Nutrilite has always done such a nice balance of everything. So I think if you roll all this article up and you put it into the Begin product, you pretty much have it. And so I think priming your body, you prep your kitchen, you prep your mind, but we don't talk a lot about prepping your body. And so we just say, hey, start off with just protein and boom, you're into it. Well, the body doesn't quite understand what you're trying to accomplish here. And so I think that if you can start even a few days before with a Begin product, I think that would do nothing but really help your system to start saying, oh, I like this. What are you putting in here? This is nice, and it starts prepping it. And then I do agree, and I will go back to Hank's story way, way back when he first started Nutrilite was, well, way even before that, he was in a very stressful job, eating poorly, a lot of demands on him. And so his stomach was in a knot. And so they wanted to put him on drugs. And, that's when he went to do his own research, and bless his heart. I mean, it changed his life, and it's changed many other lives in the process. And so I think now, what we know so many years later is we have these products and the studies have already been done. Hank had to go and uncover a lot of this stuff. But even then, when he started Nutrilite, I can remember it well because he was still in his working days. And when he started Nutrilite, he could only take the double X once a day for a few weeks because, first of all, the supplements we were taking were pretty poor supplements as far as, I mean, I don't know what we were getting out of them, but obviously when double X hit his system, it was very, very nutrient rich. And so he started out slowly. And I would say no matter how slowly you have to start out, make sure that you are priming yourself. So you prime yourself with a Begin, you prime yourself with as much supplement as you can take, for the first week or two, and just start working into it. If you have stomach problems, some people, everybody's coming at different degrees, but if you have a stomach situation, then I definitely think that Begin is a great, and everybody doesn't need, well, everybody should take it. Everybody doesn't necessarily need it from a therapeutic standpoint. So I think it's also important to have a conversation with the person you're sitting down with to find out what their challenges are. But obviously, if they have all of those kinds of challenges in the digestive system, that's definitely a really, really powerful product.
Right. And again, anyone else that has some thoughts or wants to chime in, feel free to. But this really is an important topic, and because we've talked so much about gut health, right? And you're covering a whole nother lane of this. But previously, we've talked about gut health and how it relates to our mental, emotional health, right? So I mean, this is stuff that we've in previous episodes of Voices of HealthPointe, we have covered so much on the value of having a healthy gut. But yeah, as I look more closely at this, as you said, you referred to this very ingredient category on the Begin product. It's the alkaline spices blend. Again, the first in that lineup is organic ginger root. Okay. And then it goes on. Yep. Just to kind of, and this is just on the alkaline spices blend. This isn't all the other, categories within the product, but you've got fermented organic turmeric. You've got fermented organic cinnamon bark powder, fermented organic cayenne. You've got fermented organic fennel, etc. So that is in the alkaline spices blend. And yeah, so when you mentioned ginger, I was like, yeah, there is a bit of a hint of ginger in there. And sure enough, no, no surprise. I think the PhDs at Neutralite are well ahead of us, and probably even Dr. Vivian. I'll go on record as saying they're probably even ahead of her, or at least keeping pace with her.
Well,
Yeah.
and you mentioned about the turmeric. That's the king of herbs to help you with inflammation. And the source and the bottom line of all diseases is inflammation. It's your body telling you, I don't like what's going on here. And they inflame, and no matter what ailment you have. And so that's why that's a turmeric in there. And we even take the Nutrilite organic turmeric in addition, because we are slammed with so much stuff. I mean, we're around people, we're on planes, we're in stores, we're all over the place. And we have to keep our bodies we have to put a coat of armor on our bodies. And that's what I call Nutrilite, is a coat of armor that your body is being protected. So I love that there's turmeric in there too.
Yeah. There was something else that you mentioned that I know will resonate with everyone that has any association with the works of Peter Attia. And Carol, I know you are reading his book as well, called Outlive. Emily, my wife, has read that book. My dad, we got him a copy, and he pounded that thing. And this is a dense book. This is not light. This is not light reading. Yeah, buckle in when you get that book in your hands, because you're on for a ride. But one of the interesting charts and graphs that he talks about, and what I'm speaking to, is where you reference, hey, when you were 21, this is what your body was doing. And and for those that have seen his chart, it's a very simple chart, an XY axis. And as time moves along, as you age, it shows health span versus lifespan. So it shows a arc, declining of the, I think, representing maybe a typical American. I mean, just statistically on the age. But more importantly, what he's pointing out is health span, which is by doing these interventions. Now, supplementation is just one of them, and we're kind of focusing on that lane right now. But of course, in HealthPointe, we're talking about the other categories as well. We're talking about walking, we're talking about good, and you talked about in here about the good sleep, and we talk about hydration and so forth. But what's interesting is when you impact that lifespan and focus more on health span, that arc, say you're going from 21 years to 31 to 41 to 51 to 61 to 70, etc. That line has more of a gradual taper to it. Instead of getting to whatever 50, 60, 70 and seeing this typical arc of the line of a American lifestyle where it is dropping like a rock. That line is dropping like a rock. Why? Because there's been no impact on that line. There's been no intervention on that line. And there are just natural aging processes that happen. And you can have impact on that, as you mentioned, Carol. I mean, one of the ones that I've spoken about that is, I think, very common is, around, I'm 57. So I, some time ago, as most people will, notice that I was not producing enough enzymes, okay, to break down food. Now, how do you know that? You eat a meal and you feel very bloated, uncomfortable, gassy afterwards. And it's not something where you go, from 1 year and immediately to the next year, it's like a light switch. It's a gradual thing. And guys, these are the things to be aware of. Most of us have heard the metaphor of, how do you cook a frog? You just put them in, lukewarm water.
Yep.
And, how do you cook a frog without having them jump out, right? If you drop a frog into, super hot water or something, or even probably super cold, they're going to like, panic and jump out. And, but if you put that frog into just, kind of comfortable, a little bit warm, but comfortable, and then just slowly turn up that temperature, those little incremental adjustments of heat don't get recognized. And next thing you know, the frog's cooked. I don't know if that's urban legend, but the point is still the same. And that is, most of these things that we're talking about are not like, smack you in the head, flip a light switch type of things. That's why they call it chronic. These are slow incremental things that in many cases kind of don't get noticed until you go into a doctor and they give you, put you on notice that, such and such a, line item in your health chart is way out of whack. So, when you talk about like things like digestive enzymes, going back to that, it wasn't like I went from eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner on a Monday and everything was happy-go-lucky, and then I ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner on Tuesday and I was just a bloated, uncomfortable mess. No, if it would have happened like that, I would have immediately taken action. It wouldn't have been that frog cooking in the water type of a moment, but instead it's just a gradual degradation over time. And one day I just like, wow, I didn't even notice it actually. It would just fortunately came up in conversation with our good friend and business coach, Marnie Fondren. And she said,
very wise woman.
Very wise woman. Yes. And, that was, foreign information to me. I had no idea. And I had no idea that as part of the natural aging process, most people will experience a degradation in that very important enzyme to help you digest food. So it was night and day. I mean, it was incredible. Now, the same thing. I had to take it for a while. That was another pro tip. Is I took it for a couple of weeks, and next time I was talking with Marnie, I said, appreciate your recommendation, but really not seeing any impact. And she's like, well, it doesn't seem like you've been taking it. No, I was like, well, a couple of weeks. I don't know what it was, a week or two. And she's like, no, take it for a while. Give it a good 30-day run, and which I did, and I'm so grateful because it absolutely works, and I take it every day now. And so these are things that through the natural aging process, where you can kind of bolster that lifespan, health span line. And if you don't do any interventions, you just follow that typical trajectory, particularly if you just follow what so many Americans are doing in terms of how eating and sitting on the couch constantly and stuff like that. Sorry, I'm kind of beating up on the average American, but that lifespan is very swift drop in terms of quality of life. But you do some of these interventions, some of which is the supplementation, and boy, you can extend that health span and have more healthy, vibrant years. So so that's the Peter Attia.
As I was listening to you, Eric, and your stuff is always so wise. You just are able to just bring it out so well. And it makes me think of two words: consistency and compounding. And the key, and oh boy, I can't impress upon new people more that the key to anything is consistency. I mean, I did a whole training on that about 3 weeks ago for our business owners. But consistency is key because it has to build up in your system and then stay with it. People will say, well, I took bone health for a while and then I forgot about it and I stuffed it in the back of my cabinet. And then, the stuff is just sitting there. It doesn't help you if it's sitting in a box or sitting in a container. So consistently taking it over time produces the results. And if any of you have ever read, one of my very favorite books is called The Compounding Effect. And it's by
is that Darren Hardy?
The Hardy, yeah. I had it in my head, and then it was coming out Darcy. Darren Hardy. Yes, and he's a great, great author, but he talks about the compounding effect and how you take is like you take the penny and it compounds. You take a habit and it compounds. Hank took a habit back in 1972 that compounded to the point where he's 92 now, drug-free, got all his original parts. You know, that was a compounding thing that he invested in himself over time. And what you're saying, you started taking the digestive enzymes. I've heard this over and over again. Well, I took them and then I kind of forgot about them. They didn't seem to be making any difference. Well, it took you 40 years to get where you're at. And all of a sudden in a week, you're gonna just be a completely remade person. And that's unfortunately our society. We're a microwave society. You have to get in your brain consistency. I'm going to take this and okay, I'll reassess after 3 or 4 months, not after 2 weeks. I'll reassess and then I will talk with my coach and see, and I will look also back and see if there's any noticeable difference. So I think the consistency to compounding, to get that compounding effect is so important.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey, Hank, speaking of the man of the hour, good morning,
Yeah.
Hank.
I've been listening to this and it's so very true. It's, what Carol just said, we ruin our body over the years and expected to get back to 100% in 2 weeks. It doesn't work. I will give you a good example. A good friend of ours, she was scheduled for open heart surgery this last Wednesday. They took her in to prep her up. They found out she had so much blood thinners in her, they sent her back home. So we could not do the surgery until we get these blood thinners that she's been taking out of her system. And that's so sad when people revert to doing stuff like all those chemicals and medications to take care of a situation, immediately what it does to their system. I just want to share that with you. Okay? Great comparison to the topic. Okay. So I hope
And
that helps.
thanks for bringing that up, Hank, because that very same woman, about 3 months ago, I was with her at a church function, sitting around the table with her, and I had talked to her and her daughter. Her daughter also had open heart surgery, talking to them about HealthPointe. And they said, yeah, we're going to call you. We're going to call you. We'll have lunch this weekend. We'll talk about it. And they never called. And then I reached out, no answer, no feedback. And so at this lunch a couple of months ago, she said, I'm definitely going to be calling you for lunch. I said, okay, I'm available. And she never called. And I reached out to her and she never responded. And that's what happens. They get a quick fix, Band-Aid, and then boom, there they are. Exactly what Hank said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we are used to, popping a pill or something and having this instantaneous change. And our bodies are, thank goodness our bodies do respond, but it may not. What I mean is, the more you understand about our body, the more, we're all just in awe. It goes beyond in awe. The complexity, the beautiful dance of balance that it does. And imagine that you kind of only had one shot. It was on a trajectory, and if you messed up, started messing up your body, there was no recovery. It just said, sorry, dude, you messed me up. You're on this track. But it's not. But at the same time, it's not, take 1 or 3 days of digestive enzyme and expect, miracles. Okay. It can take some time to recover. But what is so beautiful about the human body is it wants there is a natural balance, or what's called homeostasis, that the body seeks. And when it is out of balance or in, disease, it is wanting to get back to that balance of health. So you've got your body on your side. You just got to give it a chance. And it's not always easy. And, to your example, we all get frustrated with folks like that. I continuously do, because we want to help everybody. But people, they're sometimes scared, particularly if they've been unhealthy, not for a year or 2 years, but maybe a decade or 2 or 3. And they have this mindset that's developed. They have this life that's developed. Change can be scary. And that's why in HealthPointe, we're really in the business of more, we talk about atomic habits, and habits and behavior change, more than the knowledge. The knowledge is part of it, but it's really helping people through their own barriers. And and sometimes you can't help. I mean, the metaphor that I use is, I'm throwing a lifeline. You're in rough seas right now. Okay. You're in an ocean, heavy seas, big waves, howling wind. I've got this huge battleship, of stability called HealthPointe, and you're awash in the sea, and I'm throwing you a line. All you've got to do is 2 things. First, grab that line. Okay. Which is, to your person so far, they are trying to swim it around, or say, I don't have a problem, or I'm too scared, I'm not going to grab that line. And you can't do anything for that.
No.
You can't make them grab the line. They have to. And that's life. Life is choices. They can choose to grab the line or not grab the line. And then the second thing is, you've got to hold on. If you stop checking in, if you stop doing the, in terms of my non-negotiables, if I'm going to work with somebody, that's the equivalent of grabbing onto that line. Great, we applaud that. But then if you let loose of that line, it's pretty tough for me to swim after you in the heavy seas, especially when I've got a lot of lines out there, a lot of other people that I'm helping that are holding on. The time and attention that it takes to jump in the water and try to encourage you to grab that line again can be exhausting on me. So you just got to hold on. You don't have to be perfect, but you got to grab the line. You got to hold on, and pretty soon you'll be on that battleship. So, well,
Eric,
yes,
Eric?
Hank.
Yeah, I just came across a quote yesterday. I'm looking at it right now, by somebody called Motivational Doctor, okay, calls himself. And here's what he says: your body's ability to heal is greater than anyone has permitted you to believe.
Mhm.
I'll repeat it.
Mhm.
Your body's ability to heal is greater than anyone has permitted you to believe.
Mhm. Very
Mhm.
good. Yeah.
Wow.
Just want to share that with you.
Yeah, that puts a point on it. That puts a point on it. And thank goodness, again, thank goodness that is the case. Because could you imagine if that wasn't the case? I know I'd be toast, because some of the choices that I made at 21 or 31 or whatever. But, it's, you're not handcuffed to that trajectory. You can make these choices and
I
change the trajectory.
I agree. I know I was toast. Okay,
Yeah.
in my 40s.
I married
Yeah.
an old man. Now I got a young one.
I love it. Oh, that's fun.
Well,
Yeah.
that book, Choose Your Story, Change Your Life. And we always talk about, instead of a period, which means end of story, put a comma. And if we can help people think about putting a comma on the chapter of the sentence of where they are right now, and then gradually changing, I think that psychologically, that might give them a visual to help them realize that I'm not going to make a 90-degree right turn, screech my tires. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to gradually, with the help of my coach, put a comma on that and gradually move towards a new direction that's going to pay me many, many healthy years later on, or at least give me a fighting chance.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And it's just way more fun. I mean, who wants to be, kind of sick? And so, well, again, for all our folks out there that are on the call, it's open to questions, comments. But if there's nothing else, I'll kind of move on to the next segment.
Hey, Eric.
And
Hey, Eric.
yes,
Just
Larry.
for a minute before you go into your segment, you mentioned something earlier, and I was just thinking that I had read an article just recently. It was talking about the dangers of sitting. You talked about sitting. It was saying that why sitting is the new smoking, because it causes so many health hazards. And one of the things that we're doing on HealthPointe is we're being more intentional about our moving, and we're moving more. But, sometimes maybe we need to keep track of how long we're sitting, because sometimes we don't realize how much we are sitting. My granddaughter always says all the time, "Oh, Grandpa, I'm just chilling," and sometimes we chill just a little bit too long. Sometimes we chill longer than we think. The other thing about sitting, it was talking about how many other chronic health problems it causes because people do too much sitting. It's talking about diabetes and cancer and heart disease, putting on weight, and we can sit in front of a television set for hours. We can sit at our computer for hours. Sometimes we sit when we're doing activities, and we do a lot of sitting. And we don't realize how many health problems it causes. That I think when I was reading the article, it said that most people were sitting from something like 8 to maybe 16 hours. Maybe not that much, but what I'm saying is that they were sitting long periods of time and not really paying attention. And so monitoring that, keeping track of it, just like we do our movements, might be helpful to us as well. So I was just thinking, reading that article, I sent it to one of my clients because they like to chill. Okay. And so actually they do too much sitting, and I'm not pointing my finger at them because I've been guilty of it too. When I'm active, but however, when I'm not active, then a lot of times I could do less sitting. So just wanted to add that in. I know everybody knows that. It's just a simple concept, but very important.
Yeah, it's worth repeating because it's a daily thing. Now, I noticed something just with you being on camera here, Larry, and am I correct in when I'm looking at you? I think you're standing. Is that correct, or are you sitting right now?
I'm sitting now.
Oh, are you? Okay. All right. Well, sorry. Sorry on that. What I was going to say is that it looked like you were standing, and that's one of the things that can be done. Just a shout out to Emily, my wife, where when her work, particularly back with COVID, was more work at home. In fact, it was exclusively work at home. She's got a stand-up desk. Okay. But it doesn't have to be a fancy stand-up desk. I mean, for her, it's work, it's constant. So it was a good investment. I don't think it was a lot of money, but to get one of those stand-up desks, one that you push a button and it will rise up and your computer and everything is up. And then you push a button, it can go down to a regular seating height. But then the other thing that she got is, a nice pad. They have these pads that you can put on on the floor, because if you're standing, it's just more comfortable over time, especially if you're talking about a work day where you're standing on that. I'm standing right now. Okay. I'm standing. It's not a fancy stand-up desk, or I kind of feel like I should have a pad under my feet, standing for upwards of an hour here during our walk and talk. But that's something else. If you find yourself doing, just think of these alternative strategies when, to Larry's point, you're going about your day, and just think, can I be doing something other than sitting? And you might find that there's opportunities to not be sitting and doing the same thing. But I'm very guilty of that as well, Larry. I mean, full transparency. I can veg, like, if there was a trophy for veg state, I might be a multi-year champion on that, because I'm with you. Sports or other things, veg. So it's important for us to recognize that and then work to change that.
Right.
So,
It was that the body was built to stand, and that's where we develop, our strength, and to keep our body, functioning, gravity, that we were built to stand. And so, just adding that to our point here.
yeah, it was interesting. I don't know if, how many of you have heard or seen the documentary, or maybe documentaries on blue zones. You've heard that term, blue zones. These are the areas in the world where there, people that live, very healthily. It's a bunch of people like Hank, I'll put it that way, okay, in their 90s, and centenarians over 100, and like, just living very well at that age. And I remember watching on one of the documentaries, one of the areas of Japan. It wasn't all of Japan, it was this particular area of Japan. And there's a number of contributing factors, but one of the things that I thought was interesting, to your point, Larry, is not only were they constantly walking, just, putting about, doing their gardening, walking to their neighbors and stuff like that, but they didn't have chairs. And they made a point of that in the documentary, that, here's this woman that they were highlighting, and I think she was over 100. And, she's got her friends over at the house, the kids, the grandkids, whatever. It was kind of like a family outing. And they're just down on the floor sitting, when they're having fun, laughing. And then she's got to get up. So she's up, down, up, down. Think of that. Maybe do that. Maybe you get rid of all the chairs in your house, and next time you need to watch TV, you got to get down. Or I'm saying that to myself. Maybe I get rid of the chairs in front of the TV, and I've got to at least get down and sit on the floor, and then have to get back up. So, I mean, it's just kind of a fun mental exercise there. So great stuff. Thank you, Larry. Thank you for hopping in there on that. And let me jump into a continuation on the Stello product. So this is a continuation from last week's episode. I think it merits multiple episodes, because, guys, I've been waiting over 2 years since I understood the wonderful benefits of a continuous glucose meter. The continued frustration was the cost and the barrier of needing a prescription. So I'm talking about the Stello, which you can go on to stello.com, STELO.com. Maybe check with your coach first before, just jumping into that, see what their thoughts are on that. But they're only $99. That gets you 2 devices. You pop them onto the back of your arm, and each device is good for up to 15 days. But it is a biological device. It might get you a handful of days. It might get you 15. But if you are using that full $99 package, that could get you up to 30 days of continuous glucose monitoring. And so what I wanted to start with is, I mentioned at the launch of this session that I was going to cover 8 points real quickly, just on kind of a reminder on the value of a CGM. So let me jump into that, and then I'll move on to a brief next segment of taking a look at an actual chart of someone that's worn this Stello, and get some insights from that. So point number 1, continuous data from glucose monitoring helps reinforce confidence in lifestyle interventions for improved metabolism. So we've talked about that in the past, you know, maybe some of the James Clear stuff with Atomic Habits. When you have that feedback loop, you know, it's one thing if somebody says, hey, you should do this, maybe you should eat this, maybe you should do this, and you're like, yeah, okay. And sure, over time, weeks, months, maybe years, you obviously see those results. With a CGM on your arm, you see it pretty much real time. So that, again, continuous data from glucose monitors helps reinforce confidence in lifestyle interventions for improved metabolism. Point number 2, research shows that after a meal, healthy glucose levels should peak within 45 minutes and come down within 90 minutes to 2 hours, with slower recovery indicating potential insulin resistance. And we're actually going to look at that when I show the graph. Point number 3, a 2018 Stanford study found that non-diabetic individuals wearing CGMs showed significant glucose variability, with some entering pre-diabetic or diabetic ranges despite not having been diagnosed. So that's kind of a compare and contrast between, you know, if somebody doesn't use a CGM, what do they do? Well, maybe it's just their annual blood work with their doctor, and that's a total snapshot. You've got 365 days in a year, 24 hours in a day, and you're going to pick 1 second of that time range, take a blood sample and say, this is your blood reading, your glucose reading, your insulin resistance. And it's, you know, that'd be one thing if it wasn't such an important marker, but this is incredibly important. So, you know, if that's all you're going to do, it's better than nothing, but it could really be lacking in insight. Number 4, glycemic variability, or GV, is a measurable indicator of glucose spikes. Higher variability correlates with worse metabolic biomarkers, including insulin and triglycerides. This one, I want to take a little bit of a different thing, and something that we continuously reinforce in one of the courses that I'm in right now, and that is to not bank on any kind of single biomarker, okay? We are a complex mechanism. So although blood sugar readings over time are very indicative of your overall metabolic health, and whether you're on a path towards predictable chronic decline and disease, or whether you're on a more healthy approach, I will say you take it ideally not in isolation. So if you see, for example, a GV number that is kind of, or GV visual that is kind of, you know, maybe not so hot, but then you take a look at other things like maybe with your annual exams, if you take a look at your HDL and your LDL and your total triglycerides, if your triglycerides are super healthy and your HDL is on the high range of, you know, good range, so your triglycerides you want to be low, your HDL you want to be high. If those numbers are good and you've got this little GV going on your stellar GGM, take that all into consideration. Don't just take an isolated data point to drive all your understanding of your body. Number 5, high area under the curve, otherwise known as AUC, after a glucose spike is associated with insulin resistance, while a quick return to normal leads to a lower AUC, indicating healthier metabolic function. Again, we'll look at that visually, graphically with a screen share here in a moment. Number 6, for glucose management, lifestyle factors like walking after meals can significantly reduce glucose spikes by 30 to 35%. Okay, so again, that real-time feedback, you eat a meal, you say, you know, I heard they said this was good. I'm going to not walk after. I'm just going to go sit on that chair or couch and watch some football. And you watch on your glucose, your CGM, what happens with your blood sugar. Then you say, well, I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to go for just a 20-minute walk after this meal. Then you look at your CGM. And again, that real-time feedback is what reinforces things like point number 6, where you can see upwards of a 30 to 35% reduction. Number 7, continuous glucose monitoring helps identify sneaky spikes in common foods like dates, smoothies, like quick oatmeal, helping users make smarter dietary choices. Emily and I were guilty of this. You know, how many people will eat something because the industrial food marketing machine has said this is quote unquote heart healthy, and you know, we're all victims of this constant marketing on us. And oh, you know, they say it's heart healthy, I'm gonna eat a big pile of that in the morning. And then you get a CGM on your arm and you see where your blood sugar is going through the roof. Other things, I mean, there are healthy smoothies and not so healthy smoothies. Yeah, snoozies. Yeah, you eat an unhealthy smoothie and you will be snoozing because you'll have probably you'll go hypoglycemic and have the food coma. But you know, if you've just got a straight shot of essentially sugar into your system through what looks to be like a healthy smoothie that you purchase at some kiosk, you know, you're telling yourself you're healthy, but if you actually are wearing a CGM, you might see different data that comes in. You might want to pair that with some protein into that smoothie so it blunts that that glucose spike. Okay, so that's something that you can learn. And certainly one of the biggest offenders, according to Dr. Casey Means, with all their data points, they've got so many people wearing CGMs with their product, and people log what they ate when that spike happened. And quick oats is one of the biggest offenders. Why? How many of us have grown up saying, you know, this is healthy food, you know, this is a great breakfast, so we pound it. And those quick, you know, oats, I won't name brands, but those quick oats can send your blood sugar absolutely through the roof. So that informs you on choices. Then lastly, the regular use of CGMs can help avoid unexpected diagnosis like prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, offering early insights into glucose trends that may otherwise go unnoticed. How do most people realize that they're pre-diabetic? How do people realize that they're type 2 diabetic? Now, I do think this product is going to change the trajectory of that if people use it. But how do most people find out? They get their annual, again, once a year often, maybe twice a year, visit, and their doctor just, bam, hits them with this news. If you're wearing a CGM, that would never surprise you. You would have the data, you would have agencies, you would have insights and control over what's happening with your blood sugar long before you would have that conversation with your doctor. If anything, you would inform them on what you are seeing. But most people, prior to technology like this, and is you go into the doctor and they're like, hey, bad news, you know, you're diabetic. And you're like, whoa, okay. It's just this hard-hitting thing. So this will give you insights and agency, so that will never be a surprise for you. All right, let me do a quick screen share here. I don't typically strive to do this because you're relying on technology and everything, but I'm going to try to, I mean, not that I have a problem with technology, but I'm doing two devices here, and let me see what I can do here. So just bear with me. Okay. And let me. Okay. I think we got her going. And let me get on over to this. All right. So real quickly, because we're about ready to wrap up here, this is just looking at a particular individuals, and I realize that all of you aren't necessarily able to look at your screens right now, but well, I don't necessarily want everybody to unmute here. So let me just kind of monologue through it. I was going to ask, you know, even if you're not a coach or if you're a layperson, you're looking at this, you know, what would you say that you're seeing and again, this is a CGM. This is the data that shows on your app, on the Stello app. And that line is your various data points, that connect into a line showing your rise and fall of your blood sugar. Okay, so let me just point out a couple of things. We could say, okay, if you're looking at this, if this just landed on your desk and somebody was asking you, how am I doing? Is my blood sugar good or not so good, or what would you think? Well, and this particular one, not so good, not so good. The Stello app has a very broad, quote unquote, in range area. That's the area shaded in green. It actually bottoms out at 70 millimoles per deciliter, which arguably, certainly in the metabolic health space, would be saying, hey, you should run that chart lower than that. And you shouldn't be saying having a green zone showing 70 to 140. So I will throw that caveat in there, is that that's a very broad range. Stello is, a Dexcom product. They're going to have a broad range like that just for the marketplace, but you really want to kind of keep it into a more narrow range. But that aside, even with that broad range, the first thing that you're taking a look at is somebody that is, somewhat chronically out of range, even by the standards of this app. And you can see there, a number of 146 on that latest data point, which is kind of almost a declining point. That's that last point over by 140, and you see it saying 146. So this individual has been up well into the hundreds, into the 200 range with some of those things. So that's point number one, is we don't want chronically elevated blood sugar. That's when you start developing, and probably has developed, an A1C number, where the sugar is kind of sticking or glycating to the red blood cells, which can cause other inflammatory issues, which can lead to kind of chronic situations. I know this particular individual kind of has a congestion type of a situation going on, but the fact is that when you have chronic high blood sugar or high A1C, it's setting up those inflammatory conditions in the body, which can manifest into all kinds of debilitating, things on your lifestyle. The second and last thing, I'll wrap with this just for time, is because I covered in the earlier segment there about what's called an AUC. So that's the area under the curve. Okay, so that's, if you're seeing the screen and looking at my cursor, that's that area basically, under the curve. This being the curve, okay, that my cursor is following, and then the AUC is from this point actually down to this point. And what that was saying is that you want, and let me go ahead and get out of this screen share here, and then I'll finish up my point here. Okay. And why isn't it going back away? But let me see here. Okay, well, oh, there we go. And stop share. All right. See why I don't like to introduce technology into this Voices of HealthPointe. But what that is pointing out is the AUC, the area under the curve. When you eat something that is going to rise your blood sugar, you want, that's usually going to be, maybe within a 45-minute timeline where your blood sugar will kind of cap out. And ideally, you want that to be more of a rolling hill, not a sharp up and down. But again, it depends on what you eat. And that points to that. If you just ingest basically pure sugar, you're going to see that meteoric hyperglycemic rise in your blood sugar. And then if you are insulin sensitive and metabolically healthy, you'll see a quick drop of that. So that area under the curve, the AUC, will be short. If you are not metabolically healthy and you're more insulin resistant, then you're going to see that rise. And instead of having that drop down within, 90 minutes to 2 hours back to your normal set, you're going to see more of an elongated carry of your elevated blood sugar, which translates into a longer AUC, area under the curve. So that's the second thing that I would point out on that particular chart is, number one, kind of chronically high, okay? And then number two, a relatively long AUC. So what, of course, this individual can do is certainly work on the types of food. And that's a big one. But the other one, and I happen to know this particular individual does like to move around a lot and walk and stuff like that, is maybe introduce more of that walking, particularly after a meal, to help with that and so forth. So anyhow, guys, that is it. Any final comments, questions, or anything before we kind of wrap here? I think we still got everybody all muted up, which is perfectly.
The question
Sure.
I have is, when I show the diagram on the HealthPointe hovering around 80, is that too, what's the word I want to use? Unrealistic?
No, that is that is not too unrealistic. And let me just tangent on that a little bit, because this might elucidate that and also give some people some added perspective. One of the things that I was kind of shocked to learn in one of my courses is that many of the quote unquote healthy ranges that are on like your annual blood work, we all think that those healthy ranges are based on a healthy range, right? Wrong. You say, what? That's part of it. That is part of the metric that goes in there. But do you realize that the in-range number in the United States differs between Michigan and California and Louisiana? Did you realize that the in-range number, particularly with the A1C number, is radically different between the United States and India, who has one of the highest per capita occurrences of type 2 diabetes in the world? So these in-range numbers don't necessarily mean that this is, certainly not saying it's optimal. It's taking into consideration what is the population base in your area and what is their average. So in India, their A1C number in the United States, our A1C number is, most doctors will say, most regions, again, different from state to state, but it'll be around 5.7. In India, it's a full point higher, 6.7. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot if you're not familiar with A1Cs, but the difference between a 6.7 and a 5.7 A1C is dramatic. And yet, if you're in India and you get your blood test and your A1C is 6.7 or less, you are quote unquote in range. So I just want to level set with that kind of broader understanding. And then going to the question on the 80 millimoles per deciliter, is that too strong or unrealistic? No, not whatsoever. That is really a great number. Most people are familiar with, in most regions of the United States, certainly I know here in Michigan, if you do your fasting blood sugar annual blood exam and they are coming in at a blood sugar of, everybody knows, 100 or less, we're clapping. Well, again, that's a snapshot. And so that's number one. And number two, it's not horrible, but you really should be down in, according to so many metabolic health doctors, you're going to want you down lower, averaging in the 90s, in the 80s, and many will even say in the 70s. Now, there's very low risk of this, but you wouldn't want to be chronically super low either. You don't want to have your blood sugar, chronically dropping, way low. Okay. But again, most people don't have any issue with that unless they are, particularly type 1 diabetics that can't produce their own insulin. If they over inject themselves with insulin and it shoots their blood sugar down, to 50 or below, you can go into a diabetic coma. That's why with type 1s, the injection and the metering of insulin is so critical. But no, Carol, to answer your question, 80 is absolutely, I would say it's kind of the gold standard. If you've got somebody that and all their other metabolic health markers are probably going to be lined up very healthy as well. Their triglycerides are probably going to be low and stuff like that. But in terms of your blood sugar, if you're leveling out around 80 at a rested state, then that is a great number and pretty much a gold standard for that. So no, it'd be great.
Piggybacking on that, something that Hank mentioned on a number of sessions ago, the same thing goes on with your recommended range on other blood work levels, and how they have changed over the years because of the population health ranges have gotten lower and lower, and they've broadened those ranges. Or sometimes, and I probably shouldn't say this, but maybe even skewed the ranges to get people on medications. And that's my own personal thought. You can strike that one out. But,
well, we'll throw that one on to the bold statements by Kelly Means that many people have probably heard his statements about that, and I think he would be very much in agreement with that. That there is, he points to the economic incentives through much of this, and whether it's a line for people's health or a line for them to be chronically sick. And certainly, just from a factual argument standpoint, if you can say, well, here's the range, and then, a particular number triggers a pharmaceutical product to be applied to your life, then financially, there's an incentive there. So whether they're doing it or not, we'll leave that for somebody else's podcast. But yeah, it's definitely a solid argument.
It's just, back when COVID hit, and you would hear this term, and it always made me cringe. They call it the new normal. And I hate to think of, and I'm not, I didn't mean that as a slam to the medical industry, and that might be true, might not be true. That's irrelevant. But sometimes we establish a new normal based on the times, based on situations and what have you. But what that always is a little bit scary is, let's go back to the old normal, and how different are we in the new normal, and is it really healthy to be normal anymore?
Totally agree.
Totally. So I think it's kind of like the values. Your values change over years because of the times and the media and the this and that and the other thing. It might change. Well, is that good or is that bad? Let's go back to a gold standard. I guess if you want to say it from a monetary standpoint, let's go back to a gold standard. And the gold standard doesn't change. And I think if we can hit the gold standard in our approach to health, how much better off we'll be. Not to, maybe we're way out of whack, but this still is the gold standard. So let's get back in, and let's work towards that. Don't just say, well, I'll work towards that new one. The same thing, dress sizes. You go into a store and there's like 3/4 of them are oversized dresses now versus normal sizes. Why is that? It's the new normal. Well, that's not necessarily good. So I think we as individuals, let's just put it that way, we have a personal responsibility, I think, to go back to what is our normal, and what do we believe is right from a health standpoint. And certainly before a lot of the things that have happened to our foods and what have you have come into play. Let's go back to some of those and get back on track. Let's get back to where we were and try to hover
I
around
agree.
this level. Yeah. So
I totally agree. And it's my vision and belief that with products like this, like, again, I encourage everyone, maybe check with your coach first, but I doubt that anyone would say, well, no, don't monitor your own blood sugar. You know, for $99, get one of these Stellos. That's my belief, is that I do think that a lot of people have found themselves in a unhealthy state. I mean, Emily and I were not like voracious, you know, trying to be unhealthy 7 years ago. We thought we were kind of doing things right. If somebody would have said, Eric, just put one of these things on your arm, or, you know, spend 99 bucks, pop this on your arm and let the data show you, boom, I'd be done. I would be so like, whoa, okay, now I'm ready, because I thought I was doing okay. And so I believe that, yes, Carol, we can get back to the healthy standards, we'll just say of 30, 40, maybe 50 years ago, the way the American population worked. Let's get back to that standard. And I think we are so well equipped with technology like this, with programs like HealthPointe, to be able to do that we didn't have back 30, 40 years ago. So I think we're in a great position, but people have to make the choice to do these types of things. So I really encourage people to get one of those Stello CGMs. I hope this episode has been helpful. Carol, your topic on the stomach acids and the overall, you know, GI tract and gut health is just out of the park. Hank, thank you so much for your example and insights on things. Larry, likewise on the walking, and then hopefully this segment, continued segment on the continuous glucose meter was great. I'll get this up onto the Voices of HealthPointe YouTube channel. For those of you that are watching this, have questions, reach out to the person that shared this episode with you, ask them about HealthPointe, and if they can get you started on a 6-week cycle. Until next time, same place, we'll say bye-bye.
thanks, Eric. Your
Bye.
segment was great.
Thank you, Eric.